What's up everybody? In this video I'm going to be talking about the Alien franchise, which has been a staple of sci-fi cinema since its inception. Whether you're a casual film goer or a fan of the series, you can show someone a picture of the Xenomorph and they will likely know what it is. However, despite the franchise's popularity, Alien has been handled with disrespect for much of its existence. From killing characters off screen, major studio interferences, terrible writing and story directions, and some abysmal tie-ins for the expanded universe, it's safe to say while the franchise has had its high moment, that there's also been a few downers along the way. And in this video, we're going to examine all of the films in the franchise to answer the question: does this entry respect or disrespect the franchise and its source material? Quick disclaimer, everything in this video is going to be my personal opinion. You may agree, you may disagree, and that's fine. So I'll talk about what I don't like and things that I do like.
I like rocks. I love rocks.
Let's rock!
So let's start off with the first film, Alien. I think we already know the answer here. Of course, this film respects the franchise and the source material because it is the source material. Up until recently, I'd only seen Alien once when I was 13. That changed when I rewatched the entire franchise for this video. What surprised me most is how well it all holds up. The sets, the costume design are S-tier enough to make modern filmmakers jealous. Alien nailed a distinct aesthetic. It starts off on the Nostromo, which has a used and future look. It's cramped, dimly lit, and it has an industrial but functional feeling to it. Far from the pristine and sterile USS Enterprise or the Death Star, the Nostromo reminds me of like a cargo ship or an oil refinery, with its exposed piping, condensation, metal grates and tight corridors. It feels very real. The Alien itself is a masterclass in monster design. H.R. Giger created pure nightmare fuel. The egg alone feels alive and yet wrong. Now sure, Kane was stupid for leaning in, but if everybody was smart, these films would be really boring. The facehugger kicks the plot into high gear. There's human vulnerability on full display. It's creepy, it's disturbing and clever, with acid blood that makes killing it dangerous. The chestburster scene still works brilliantly. It's chaotic, it's unforgettable. And in the interest of time, I do want to keep moving because there is a lot to cover here. The Xeno grows fast, and even though you can tell it is clearly a man in a suit, it has never looked better. The derelict ship is also another stunning set, completely different to the Nostromo in its look and design and presence, hinting at a bigger mystery that Ridley Scott wisely leaves unanswered. So who is this being? What is this ship and why are the eggs here? The rest plays out like a slow burning slasher in space, led by Ripley, who is the gold standard for all strong female characters. Ripley doesn't just try to be, the archetype of a strong male character. Ripley instead is smart and resourceful. And then there's Special Order 937, which adds another layer of dread. A brilliant start to the franchise. So that's essentially the first film covered. It's an excellent first entry. So let's move on to Aliens. For most people, their favourite film in the franchise is either going to be Alien or Aliens. For me, it is this film, in particular the special edition, which adds some scenes which help with the story and the world building. And what's good about this film is that it is a direct continuation of the first film from the protagonist's perspective. It seamlessly goes from the end of Alien to the beginning of this film. Continuity is something that has become a problem in this franchise going forward. Aliens, as you know, goes for a more of a action-focused approach over horror. There is still some horror, such as the scene where the family at the start of the film are attacked by a facehugger, or again when the facehuggers attack Ripley and Newt. But for the most part, this film is a testosterone-filled, action-packed adventure, and I love it. Straight off the bat, the aesthetic for this film is very similar to Alien, despite it being nearly 60 years along in a timeline. The Xenomorphs do look a bit different, but that's because these Xenomorphs are warriors instead of drones. Now that's not explained in this film, but I wouldn't say the Xenomorph design is disrespectful to the original. And like the original, it's all practical effects and looks different, but not deviating. And unlike Alien, it doesn't appear like the Xeno is just a guy in a suit, at least not to the same extent as the original. The cast are given more to do in this film, which in turn makes them easy to root for, and they all have distinct personalities. Just take a look at Apone when he's waking everybody up.
Alright, sweethearts, what are you waiting for? Breakfast in bed? Another glorious day in the Corps.
You also have Hudson, who is your typical jarhead, and Hicks, who is like a professional soldier. The Marines themselves have become a major icon for this franchise, from their outfits, their weapons, and would even go on to be a major inspiration for Halo Combat Evolved.
Man, we let those dumb bugs out to the middle of nowhere to keep them from getting their filthy claws on Earth. But we stumbled onto something they're so hot for that they're scrambling over each other to get it. Well, I don't care if it's God's own anti-son of a bitch machine or a giant hula hoop. We're not gonna let them have it. What we will let them have is a belly full of lead and a pool of their own blood to drown in. Am I right, Marines?
Sir, yes, sir!
Damn right I am.
Most of the Marines are killed during their first encounter with the Xenomorphs, which, despite the fact that these guys are packing some serious firepower, they still for the most part get their asses handed to them. And this sequence is also where Hicks makes himself known.
I'd like to keep this handy for close encounters.
Now, in the interest of time, because I could talk about this film all day, here's a few more things that I think absolutely slap. Ripley defending Newt from the facehuggers, Hicks charging in to save Ripley and Newt, the sentry gun scene, the lab battle. I love the Queen's introduction and the parallel motherhood between her and Ripley's solo hive rescue and the power loader fight.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Absolutely perfection. Ultimately, I think Aliens to this day is the best the franchise has ever been. Yes, it has aged in some ways, but from the pacing, the aesthetic, the creature design, the world building, story, the characters, I think Aliens hits their ground running and keeps going right up to the very end of this film. Could you just imagine seeing this in cinemas when it came out? It must have been such an incredible moment. If they had internet back then, people would be going on forums, coming up with all kinds of fan theories, speculations on where the story goes next. So to answer the question, we can safely say that Aliens respects the franchise and the source material, but also expands on the story without taking away from the original film. But sadly, we're only 2 films into this franchise and things are already going to start to go bad. Alien 3. Now, I should warn you, there's going to be a few potential hot takes incoming and I'm not going to apologise. So straight off the bat, Alien 3 commits not 1, but 2 cardinal sins of cinema. First of all, continuity errors. At the beginning of Alien 3, we see the Sulaco drifting through space in a montage-style sequence showing that something is wrong. There's an egg on the ship, and it starts a fire and infects Ripley. Now, why is this a problem? Well, this comes up on the Alien subreddit like every week, over 30 years later, and a lot of us are still collectively mad about this. How does the alien egg even get on the Sulaco? We never see the Queen carrying an egg, or a facehugger for that matter. She has detached herself from the egg-laying sac thing, so she can't lay any more eggs. The Queen also only enters the hangar bay of the Sulaco, and the egg is in a different part of the ship. There is also the issue of how the eggs don't open unless disturbed by a living being, and if everyone is frozen, just how does that happen? There are hundreds of theories as to how the egg got on the ship, but that's all they are, they're just theories. We have to come up with some crazy headcanon just to make it all work. The second cardinal sin is that both Hicks and Newt are killed off screen. What the fuck? I cannot stand this in filmmaking. There is just no justification for this. It really makes it feel like everything that Ripley, Hicks and Newt went through in Aliens is all for nothing. Actor Michael Biehn, who played Hicks, has expressed his disappointment with him not being in Alien 3 and being killed off screen.
Okay, I mean, I heard it through my agent or whatever that you're not in it, which was very painful. It hurt me a lot because I didn't really even get paid very well for Alien, and I thought, okay, well, if there's anybody who's going to be, usually with any sequel like that, they keep the characters. It's just a done deal.
So I was happy to learn that he got paid pretty much the same amount of money he got from Aliens just to have a picture of his face in Alien 3.
So then we got a call, a month or 2 later that they wanted to use my photograph. I said, now you can pay me. So they did. So I got paid almost as much for that photograph as I did for the first movie that I did.
But man, what a sour start to this film. I wasn't happy when I first watched this film when I was 13, and I'm not happy about it now when I'm 27. However, I don't think Alien 3 is a bad film. Maybe not a great Alien film, but it still is doing some things good. And namely for me, that was the casting, acting, and dialogue. Charles Dance in this film is fucking incredible. He is easily the highlight for me and is the strongest performance in this entire movie. As a teenager, I just didn't appreciate it because all I could think about was how Hicks and Newt were dead. But rewatching it now, and bear in mind this is the inferior theatrical version, I was really impressed. Also, got to give a shout out to the other actors in this film. Charles Dutton and Brian Glover, I found all of their performances to be really believable and convincing.
It's an 8-foot creature of some kind with acid for blood, and it arrived on your spaceship. It kills on sight and is generally unpleasant. And of course, you expect me to accept all this on your word.
With Charles Dance's character, Clemens, he's trying to find out what Ripley knows and what she's so afraid of. Ripley wants to do an autopsy on Newt to find out if she's infected. She says, oh, well, you know, she might have cholera. But Clemens isn't stupid. He quite literally tells her that. And he never learns about the Xenomorph until it's too late. His death was the most impactful in the entire film. I wish he could have been in it for longer, but there is just this whole tragedy of just how he never learnt about the Xenomorph, so he isn't able to help as much as he could have. Speaking of the Xenomorph, for a lot of the time the Xeno shows up in this film, it looks like shit. So yes, there is the iconic scene of the Xeno going right up to Ripley's face, and I could also say when practical effects are being used, it looks very good. But man, the CGI Xeno is the ugliest thing in this entire franchise, period. This seriously took me out of the film. It killed pretty much all the immersion. It just looks so bad. Also in this film, I can't help but think the Xenomorph is a side character in its own show. It shows up on occasion, kills a few prisoners, but it's never the main threat. In fact, the main danger in this film is the fact that Ripley is infected with a queen. But because we know she's infected, we know she's condemned, so she's going to die no matter what. If you know the main character is going to die, is the Xenomorph even scary at this point? For me, it wasn't. On top of this, I don't really find the setting of the planet that interesting or all that sci-fi. The prisoners even state in the film that nothing really works here. The aesthetic of Alien and Aliens is largely missing here. I'm not a huge fan of this film, as you can tell, but if you know what went on behind the scenes, then actually it's quite impressive that this film even got made at all. This is the biggest issue with this film, and it's studio interference. Fox basically role-played as Weyland-Yutani for the production of this film, and I highly recommend the documentary The Making of Alien 3. It's on YouTube and it's very insightful. One of the main reasons Alien 3 is so flawed and uneven is because Fox could not get a script together for this film.
Very shortly after writing the story for Alien 3, I'd hopped off the plane, I'd written up the story. Within a month, the owner of the studio had given us a release date. Now that's great for somebody who wants to keep working, but it's not great if you're being adventurous about a story and exploring it.
I always felt that Alien 3 was a movie that initially, as a studio, we set out to make a release date and not make a movie.
One was to have the film set on a wooden planet with monks. Another was to have it set on a space station that was essentially small-town America in space with a sinister lab underneath it. And another involved a brewing conflict between Weyland-Yutani and space socialists, so to say. But ultimately, the script we got was the one you see in Alien 3, and even then, for filming, they didn't have a finished script. Sometimes the script would change during filming, so all the sets constructed would have been done for nothing. Fox sent enforcers to the sets to make sure their vision was being followed through, and this all resulted with director David Fincher walking out towards the film's completion. David has gone on record to say he hates and disowns this film, which is all a bit tragic really. As a result, we get Alien 3, a film that broke continuity, killed characters off screen, killed the protagonist of the series, and used some questionable CGI while sidelining the Xenomorph for much of the film. Despite that, there are some fantastic performances and camera shots used in this movie. Perhaps if Fox had been more organised, we could have gotten a sequel to Aliens that doesn't split fanbase's opinion. Does Alien 3 respect or disrespect the franchise? And it's a kind of mix. It disrespects the franchise and insults audiences' intelligence by waving aside Hicks and Newt, killing them off screen, and introducing a continuity error that is still discussed to this day. But it also respects the franchise because it gives us some very believable performances and Ripley's sacrifice, which was done very well. But unfortunately, we can't keep the good things about Alien 3's story because what comes next was Alien Resurrection. Whilst rewatching these films, this was the one that made me the most confused. I don't even know what the point of this movie is. Ripley is brought back to life with the Queen still inside her 200 years after Alien 3. The USM wants the alien because Ron Perlman shows up with his gang of mercenaries to deliver some hosts for the facehuggers. He meets Ripley, and for some reason he instantly tries to kill her for playing basketball without him. Winona Ryder knows who Ripley is, and she knows that she was infected somehow. There is an admittedly cool sequence where the Xenos escape containment by killing one of their own, using their blood to escape and create an escape route. Turns out the captain's an arsehole. There are several failed Ripley clones. Winona Ryder is a synthetic made by synthetics. They find a survivor who hasn't hatched a Xeno yet. The Queen gives birth to a hybrid, which is admittedly cool. The Xeno host kills Captain Dipshit by giving birth to the alien over his head. The hybrid is sucked out the window, and depending on the version of the film you watch, Ripley and co either end up in Fallout Paris or they're just flying over Earth. Honestly, nothing major really happens in this film. It is the most pointless and disconnected of all of the films in this franchise. It has neither the horror of Alien, it doesn't have the action of Aliens, and it doesn't have the clever dialogue of Alien 3. This film has the weakest script of any Alien film. In fact, Ripley has very little to say, and it feels like they needed to get Sigourney Weaver in so they could even market this film. The cast do the best with what they are given, but honestly, this film doesn't leave much of an impact for me. It's cool that they came up with a new creature, such as the hybrid, but it honestly is wasted with how little it is on screen. It doesn't really kill anyone important to the story. Such a huge waste, really. It ruins the sacrifice of Ripley from Alien 3 and leaves the franchise in a precarious position with a destroyed Earth. So to answer the question, Resurrection does not respect the franchise, the previous films, or established characters. And then after Resurrection, there is a lengthy lull in the franchise where essentially it's just placed on ice. There was 2 Alien vs Predator films, but I will not be talking about them in this video. Fox basically just pretends this franchise didn't exist for a long time, and when you consider that a lot of people didn't like Alien 3 or Resurrection, it seems like we haven't had a good Alien film since Aliens. That's a long time. 15 years later from Resurrection, Ridley Scott returns to direct Prometheus. Before this film came out, a lot of us speculated that this film would answer the question, where did the Xenomorph come from? And Prometheus does not answer that question, but it does add quite a lot to the lore. Now, like Alien 3, opinions on Prometheus are mixed. Some people like the introduction of the black goo and explaining that the engineers created humanity. Others feel that it ruined the mystery of the first film. I fall into the former camp, and upon rewatching Prometheus, I have some good things to say. But before I say that, let's get some of the bad stuff out of the way. Aesthetically, this film does not look like Alien or Alien. The film is a prequel, and yet the technology looks a lot more advanced than anything seen in those films. The Prometheus looks a lot more advanced than the Nostromo or the Sulaco. Now, people might say, yeah, well, it's the most expensive ship ever made, yada yada, but we know that film studios can replicate the visuals of older films in new ones. I detest the sequel trilogy of Star Wars films, but at least they looked like the originals, and this is the same for Alien Romulus. It looks a lot like the first film, but more on that later. Another stupid thing in Prometheus is that pretty much nearly all of the deaths could have been avoided if people were just less stupid. Like, okay, sure, the air is breathable in the ominous structure, but maybe you should just keep your helmet on because there might be some harmful bacteria in the air. Maybe that one scientist shouldn't go poking an alien that looks like a cobra. Half the crew might not actually be the best and brightest humanity has to offer. I mean, Fifield is really weird. He talks in this mysterious, creepy way. Maybe he's super obsessed with rocks.
I like rocks. I love rocks.
Now, let's discuss what I think is actually good about this film. I like how this film actually expands on the lore of the Alien universe, and it is the first film to really do so, and in many ways still is. We learn that the engineers created humanity in what is a very impressively shot sequence on Earth. We learn that they also created the black goo, which is a mutagen capable of either outright killing its victims, mutating them into monsters, or creating parasites which go on to create other monsters. In each creature you can see hints of the Xenomorph, whether that is the Hammerpede with its acidic blood, the Fifield mutant with its slightly elongated head, the Trilobite behaving similar to a facehugger, and of course, the Deacon, which is similar to a Xenomorph. I also like that we revisit the space jockey. Not the same one from Alien, but I liked seeing glimpses of them in the past, and one living, one asleep on his ship. He had a plan to go to Earth and destroy it, and upon being waken up, he kills Weyland Yutani himself, or Peter Weyland, I think his name is. The engineer is only stopped when the Prometheus and its surviving crew crash into the engineer's ship, which is a really cool sequence. We've come a long way from the CGI of Alien 3, and Prometheus still looks very good today. I also have to praise the pacing of this film. It's not a full throttle action-packed adventure like Aliens, but it plays out methodically in a good way. It's less about the action and more about uncovering the mystery. I didn't expect to actually see a Xeno in this film, but I did think we would learn where they came from. But I was happy that Ridley Scott actually decided to take an interest in his own franchise and expand on it in such depth. Prometheus also has some decent characters. Shaw is very likable, and in a twisted way, so is David. Both of them want to complete their mission, where Shaw is curious and wants to research in a more traditional sense. David is quite happy to use the crew as guinea pigs to study the effects of the pathogen on human subjects. David is a deeply flawed synthetic who appears to resent his creators and yet is obsessed with the creation of life. For all intents and purposes, he infects Holloway and Shaw, knowing full well that something bad could happen. Shaw is the opposite. Despite everything, she rescues and repairs David, and the two fly off in an engineer spaceship at the end of the film. So, does Prometheus respect or disrespect the franchise? And I'm going to say that it does respect it, because Prometheus isn't trying to be an Alien film. It's, for the most part, doing its own thing, and it succeeds by expanding on the lore and bringing us some new creatures and a few likable characters. At the end of Prometheus, Shaw says she wants to find out why the engineers created humanity, only for them to change their minds and want to destroy us. Which sounds like the premise for an epic follow-up to Prometheus. When Alien Covenant was announced, I was beyond excited. Not only were we getting a sequel to Prometheus, but this time the alien will be present. Now, we're surely going to learn where the Xenomorph comes from, right?
No, you will not.
Oh, how disappointed I was. So disappointed. Unfortunately, Alien Covenant decided to take the worst parts of Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection and mash them together. Remember how Hicks and Newt died off screen? Well, get fucked, because Shaw is dead. You don't get to see her die. All you see of Shaw is her mutilated body where David cut her open and used her organs for experiment. A cardinal sin. So no, we're not going to find out why the engineers changed their minds on humanity. David certainly doesn't give a shit about that question. I'm getting ahead a little here, so let's go to the start of the film. On board the Covenant, there is an incident where the ship is hit by some solar flare or something. This causes crew members to die. The captain, played by James Franco, is one of them. Now, I don't know how much James Franco got paid for this role, but essentially his role in the film boils down to dying. There is a promotional piece of content showing the characters before the film because you have to do some homework to get the full scoop. Putting it in the film would be stupid, obviously. So anyway, James Franco dies, and the new captain, a religious man, reluctantly assumes command of the ship. He thinks people won't like him because he's religious. That's never explained, but whatever. So the crew go out to fix the solar sails, and on their way back, Tennessee, played by Danny McBride, picks up a strange transmission. It's Country Roads, Take Me Home. To the place I belong. You know, this film would actually be less terrible if all the crew started drinking, dancing and singing. At least then we would have a bit more personality for them. If they did that, I might have actually cared about them. By the way, I should probably mention that everyone on this ship is a couple, and James Franco was the husband of our supposed protagonist, Daniels. So upon hearing John Denver in space, and the crew decide to abandon their mission to investigate the signal. They land on the planet without any spacesuits at all. Now, I know I said if people were not stupid, the film would be boring, but here the characters are stupid, and the film, well, maybe not boring, is also stupid. What I can't help but notice is the lack of personality and emotion in any of these characters. Also, aesthetically, while not as clean and sterile looking as Prometheus, it's still not quite Alien. For example, many of the crew have guns, which is admittedly a smart thing to bring with you when on a mission like this, but they're all either M4 type rifles or AUGs. I don't know why Ridley didn't just give them pulse rifles or create something similar at least. It's not long before the crew discover the engineer spacecraft crashed on a hill, and their reactions are rather unremarkable to say the least. I don't know about you, but upon discovering an alien spaceship, you think you would have a bigger reaction than just, okay. Anyway, one dude starts touching strange looking plant life and becomes infected. I'll talk more about that in a moment. The crew discover some belongings of shore and they realise there is some connection to the Prometheus. By this point, the two infected members of the crew are starting to show some symptoms. I genuinely think this is one of the two good scenes in the film. The Xenomorph is an interesting idea. An airborne pathogen seems like quite the threat, and unlike the chestburster, the Xenomorph just rips itself out of the host wherever it wants. It bursts out of this dude's back, and what follows is a frustrating attempt to deal with the alien. The crew just don't like to help each other. One lady locks another lady in a room with the creature, and then she slips up on blood, grabs a shotgun, and blows up the dropship. Dumbass! The rest of the crew return to see the destruction, and then the second Xenomorph is born, and they scramble to defend themselves. A few people die. Walter, who is a friendly version of David, punches one alien in the face. One Xenomorph is killed, and then David shows up, and the crew follow him. In the interest of time, I don't want to do a summary of the entire film, but by this point, none of the crew have done anything remarkable. No one has done anything smart or resourceful, and this is more or less how the film will continue. There's a flashback sequence where it shows David killing all the engineers or whatever they were with the black goo. It's never explained why he killed them all or if they even are engineers. There is a scene where David fingers Walter.
I'll do the fingering.
And the crew's stupidity is further exasperated when the captain finds his dead wife next to a Xenomorph. David warns him not to kill the creature, which to anyone sane would be a major red flag, right? So the captain, in all of his wisdom, after killing the creature and hearing David mourn its loss, decides to follow David into a creepy basement with some very ominous eggs. Clearly not having learnt that anything living on this planet is dangerous, and the only inhabitant is a robot who wants to protect said dangerous creatures, he approaches the egg, touches it, and is infected by a facehugger. Okay, we can have stupidity in the film, like not wearing helmet. These are the worst characters in any alien film. They are only in this film to be stupid. They have no character arc, and I'm going to offer an alternative version of this scene that I think would make more sense, but still ends up with the captain getting infected. So here we go. The captain, after seeing the Xenomorph eating his wife, shoots the creature dead. David, mourning the creature's death, attacks the captain. The captain is injured but returns fire on David, hitting him with a bullet. David runs off and the captain follows in pursuit, where he finds David in a dark room. Whilst in this room, David monologues about his creation needing a host. While the captain is focused on David, behind him an egg opens up. By the time the captain realizes what is happening, it's too late and he is infected by the facehugger. Now, I don't work in the showbiz, but at least that way we don't make the characters look like bumbling idiots. To make a long story short, David gets on the ship, having killed Walter. He takes control and plans to use the Covenant for sinister plans. There's only 3 notable scenes in this whole film, which would have to be the Xenomorph attack, David's flashback, and the scene of Daniels fighting the Xenomorph on the dropship, which, by the way, is the only interesting thing she does for the whole film. In fact, it's the only interesting thing anyone does for the entire film. Part of me thinks the Xenomorph is in this film because of the backlash Prometheus got for not having one. Oh, I also forgot to mention, according to this film, David created the Xenomorph.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Oh yeah, we're just gonna go full Alien 3 on this bitch. Killing characters off screen, check. Continuity errors, check. And terrible dialogue from Resurrection, check. Thankfully, this film has already been retconned in a way, so David didn't create the Xenomorph, and rather he imitated it because he found some kind of blueprint or something. But I just can't believe Ridley Scott put out such a dumpster fire of a film in his own franchise that it is meant to be a prequel to the film that started it all. Ideas from Prometheus are just thrown out the airlock, and other than a few clever sequences and strong cinematography, this film doesn't offer much in either substance or style. The cast do their best, but like Resurrection, they're not given much to work with, which is a real shame because this film could have been a lot more than it was. So no, this film does not respect the franchise, it doesn't respect its predecessors, or the source material, which almost brings us to the end. Feed Alvarez said with Alien Romulus, he would be taking the franchise back to its roots. I've heard that a few times with other science fiction franchises, and I've had mixed results. That said, the trailer for Romulus showed something promising, and it soon became my most anticipated film of 2024. Me and 2 other Alien fans went to the cinema to see this film. While not everyone will share my opinion, for the most part, I was very pleased with Alien Romulus. No, it was not perfect. I didn't like it as much as Aliens, but it got enough things right for me to enjoy it. Let's talk about those things. The film starts off strong with a direct connection to the first Alien film. The big chap is recovered from the wreck of the Nostromo, who was found in a silicon rock. I immediately like this. We're expanding on the abilities of the Xenomorph without waving away the efforts of Ripley in the first film. It's brought to the space station, so we have determined a clever way to get the alien on board, and we haven't tarnished the stories that came before. So far, so good. Then we are introduced to Rain and Andy. Rain works on a miserable mining colony with her synthetic brother Andy, left to her by her parent that died in the mines, with one directive: just do what's best for Rain. Rain can't leave the colony because her work contract has been extended by Weyland Yutani. Now I like this because we're getting these characters' backstories without tons of exposition, without having to watch some promo material on YouTube, and we can resonate with them a little bit. They're a family that look out for each other, and Rain has been done over by a nasty employer. I'm sure a few of you can relate to her in that respect. I know I certainly can. We meet Rain's friends who have discovered the space station floating above, and their motivation is laid out plain and simple. Board the station, get the cryo fuel so they can sleep for a 9-year journey to another world. The film has already established a simple premise to get our characters into the danger zone, but aesthetically everything looks authentic to the franchise. Jackson Star, the planet where the characters come from, looks like a bit more of a developed version of Hadley's Hope, a bit more lived in and worked in. Admittedly, it does take the movie a while before the characters are actually on the station, and I think the film suffers from not being long enough. I would have certainly liked a few more scenes with the Xenomorph. Facehugger seems to be the bigger threat here, but I don't really mind that, because the facehugger in this film just creeps me the fuck out. Which brings me to my next point on body horror. Fede Alvarez has made Alien scary again. One of the creepiest things about Alien is how the Xenomorph species needs to enter and grow inside your body and able to reproduce. Once someone is infected, there is this tension brewing because you know something's going to happen at some point. While on the topic, it makes me think, why in Covenant is it so glossed over? The captain is never given a scene to ponder and wonder what the hell just happened to him. I agree that the gestation period is a bit short in Romulus, and that's another reason why the film should be longer, but at least they don't go from infected, cut, chestburster. All of the creatures and practical effects are really well done. Facehugger, the Xenomorph itself, there are some new additions here too. They created a new stage to the Xenomorph life cycle, dubbed the cocoon phase. It's disgusting, but it's also used to kill off Bjorn by dripping acid blood on him. To me, this is one of the most gruesome deaths in the entire series. Like, he's just slowly melting away while watching this vagina-shaped abomination bleed on him. It's all incredibly weird and creepy. Andy's chip gets changed, so he has the same directive as Rook, who is an android very similar to Ash from the first film. I wasn't too upset about them using a digital recreation of Ash, and I liked how Andy's behaviour changed when his directive changed. Shout out to David Johnson, who had the strongest performance of the whole film in my opinion. There is a neat lore connection with Prometheus and the Cold Forge. I like it when ideas from previous films are mentioned or expanded upon in later releases. Then we get to the final third film, and this is where it goes from Alien to Alien. Rain is armed with a pulse rifle, and what's cool about this one, it has 400 rounds and it has an automatic aiming system. They find Kay alive and uninfected but seriously injured, and then we get another brutal death with Tyler, who was killed by the Xenomorph's signature move. The pacing is really ramping up. Aliens are getting blown to pieces in zero gravity, which is something new. I think it's good that Romulus is trying something new without stepping on the toes of what has come before. Kay injects herself with the black goo, and if you've seen Prometheus, you just know something's gonna happen. Like I said earlier, it's body horror, which is the scariest aspect of Alien. There's a bit of a cringe line from Andy when he quotes Ripley from Aliens, but his version is very anemic.
Get away from her. You bitch.
Then we get to the final. Andy, Rain and Kay escape the space station, but this being an Alien film, you just know it's not over yet, because Kay gives birth to the offspring. When I saw Romulus at the cinema, this creeped me out and genuinely made me jump. It's another excellent addition to the monster roster of this franchise, and I like that they went for a more engineered Xeno hybrid rather than a human Xeno hybrid. Feed Alvarez confirmed this was intentional as well. The man clearly understands the world he's building in, and for the most part, I'd say he nailed it. My biggest criticism would have to be the pacing, because once the alien shows up, things start going really quickly. I think an extra 15 minutes could have fleshed out the story, maybe the characters a bit more. Every death in this film is brutal, just as it should be. Aesthetically, it looks great. The aliens are creepy. I would definitely say that Romulus not only respects the source material and the franchise, but it injects some much needed life into this franchise that has had to go a long and very bumpy road to get to where it is now. So this video may be out after Alien Earth releases. However, as of the time of this recording, my expectations for Alien Earth are incredibly high. Noah Hawley wrote and directed Fargo, which is one of, if not the best TV show I've ever seen, hands down. So the fact that he's making a long-form Alien TV show is just the symphony coming together. That's all I have for today. Tell me in the comments what you think the low and high points are of Alien. Thank you all so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video. This is my first time appearing on camera. I will get better in the future. Let me know if you want a video like this on the Alien video games. Hit subscribe for more. And until next time, I will see you in the next one.
Hey Vasquez, have you ever been mistaken for a man?